Okay, so here we go. Poilievre, that's the leader of the, if you're watching from outside of Canada, that's the leader of the Canadian Conservative Party. Poilievre calls Trudeau's snap election a cover-up for a Winnipeg lab scandal. He had a snap election in 2021. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre accused the Trudeau government of compromising national security and colluding with Beijing, alleging that the Chinese government assisted Trudeau in winning the 2021 snap election on Thursday. It sure looks funny. I'll just say that. It sure looks suspicious. And it's obvious that China wants Trudeau in office. They want him to be the leader of Canada. But we'll get into all of that. Poilievre made the accusations in response to newly released documents which reveal that two scientists working in Canada's top microbiology lab were covertly working with Beijing. With news of this first leaked to the media via largely redacted documents in 2021, the Trudeau government promptly called a snap election. After a further release of the documents, Poilievre is now accusing Trudeau of calling the election in an attempt to cover up the massive national security breach. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service discovered that two scientists fired from Canada's most secure microbiology lab. So this is Canada's most secure microbiology lab in Winnipeg, covertly worked with labs run by the Chinese government and also collaborated with institutions whose goals have potentially lethal military applications. So it's no surprise that Trudeau would not want that to come to light. Now, I've got some video here of Poilievre talking about this. This is about 3 minutes long.
Then it says Dr. Chu conducted joint research with the Major General Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army, who, according to page 236, is a noted top virologist at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense, and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism, end quote.
You can see why Trudeau would want to cover this up, obviously.
And these are documents. This is right out of the government's own documents. Trudeau, what did he do when he found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach? Did he fire anybody? No, no one was fired. Did he call an inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do that either. Instead, he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the Speaker tried to get them, he sued the Speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but well, we know from a committee composed of 4 members of Parliament, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before. It was only because Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured...
Okay, just to make it clear here, Trudeau wanted to bring in vaccines from China. Think about that. He wanted to bring in vaccines to give to every Canadian from China. I mean, do I need to say more?
China-made vaccines after learning this information. That's what was in this guy's head. And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government? Let me quote him. He has a document called Open and Accountable Government. And I quote, as head of government, the Prime Minister has special responsibilities for national security, end quote. It's his responsibility. This is his government's lab. It's not a random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime Minister's public health agency. And he is exclusively responsible for the machinery of government as Prime Minister of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover it up, not only did he try to get a vaccine from China after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out. And what happened in that election? Beijing interfered to help him win it. This is a man who says he admires China's basic communist dictatorship.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime.
We cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe. We need a strong, conservative, common sense government.
So, again, I keep feeling like I'm in an alternate universe, right? How can he still be running this country? This is just the latest scandal. Like, this alone should be enough to get any prime minister to step down. In the past, it certainly would have. But there's been like 20 of these. It just never ends. And he never leaves. And he just blames everything on everybody else. I have to think that if it were a conservative, the media would be howling for his resignation every minute. But the conservatives don't hold the purse strings for the subsidized Canadian media. Trudeau's just given an extra $100 million. He just upped the CBC to $1.4 million a year. No, not million, billion a year. You think he's doing that so that they can criticize him? I don't think so. I mean, they'll cover all this, but they'll frame it in a way that's the least damaging possible for him. Let's see. So now we've got the first public hearings on foreign interference in Canada. So this is China. Came from finding out that China was interfering in two of our elections. Now they threw in Russia and I think India as well. That's just to kind of muddy the waters. It's China. Let's see. Trudeau Foundation probe can't rule out possibility Chinese donations part of influence scheme targeting Ottawa. Seems to be a lot of China stuff going on here. And this isn't, you know what he says though? He says it's racist. How is it racist? They remember in 2020, they were saying it was racist just to say where the coof came from. This is Trudeau's go-to on everything. It's not working anymore. The magic spell is broken. But he just keeps saying it's racism or it's conspiracy theories. Well, geez, there's a lot. There seems to be an awful lot going on here that you don't want to talk about. Look at this. 83% of donations to Trudeau's Papineau riding in 2016 came from outside of Quebec. 2/3 came from around 50 Chinese donors and were given in the span of 48 hours between July 6th and 7th. That's Andy Lee. Elections Canada shows 3 donations received July 6, 2016 from Rongjiang Tiger Yuan, I hope that's how it's pronounced, totaling $4,299, reportedly a former high-ranking officer in the CCP's People's Liberation Army. Interesting timing. It's also interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of loose threads going on here. So let's see who's making all these donations. Chinese name. Jun Wang. Tina Chan. These are all Chinese names. I can see Ling Ye. Wei Zhu. These all seem to be Chinese names too. These look to be all Chinese names making donations. You can see how much at the end here. 1,500, 1,500, 1,387, 1,500, 1,500. Look at this. Seems kind of weird, right? Seems kind of weird. I mean, Trudeau said that he admired China's basic dictatorship. China seems awful keen on him. Awful keen. I mean, does this feel suspicious at all? That we already know China was interfering in elections. It just seems like an awful lot, doesn't it? At some point, you see enough smoke, there's got to be fire. So, I don't know. I mean, Trudeau desperately does not want to step down, obviously. He wants to fight. I mean, the only thing that he's kind of good at all is campaigning. But I don't think that's going to save him at this point. I think people are really people genuinely hate him in Canada. There are millions of people in Canada that genuinely hate him. There's a lot of people crossing signs. Everybody's got a line that when they get to it, when they cross it, it's over. Doesn't matter if they were a lifelong Liberal voter or lifelong NDP or whatever, or if it was the Conservatives fucking everything up. Lifelong Conservative, everybody's got a line where it starts to really affect them, where their political beliefs aren't a luxury anymore, right? It really matters now. It's not just academic. It's not just something to argue good-naturedly about at the pub. Now the shit got real.